Right now we're going to take a look at how we can multiply fractions, which is actually a lot easier than adding and subtracting fractions because we don't need to worry about finding a least common denominator. So before we get started with any of this, one of the biggest things I can point out and remind you is that this word of, anytime you see it show up in a word problem or even just being spoken out loud, this word is going to mean that you need to multiply. So, for example, if I were to ask the question, what is 1/2 of 2/3? Okay, that's really telling me what is, or asking me, what is 1/2 times 2/3? So that of really means multiply. So let's go ahead and do that example problem real fast. So we were doing 1/2 of 2/3. Now, the nice thing when it comes to multiplying fractions is we just multiply the numerator times the numerator and the denominator times the denominator. So 1 times 2 equals 2, and 2 times 3 equals 6. So then all we need to do is simplify this. And I know I can divide these both by 2. Their greatest common factor is 2. So 2 divided by 2 leaves me with 1, and 6 divided by 2 equals 3. So 1/2 times 2/3, or 1/2 of 2/3, equals 1/3. Okay? Now, let's do another practice problem there. So let's go ahead and do 4/5 times 3/8. Okay, now in this case, again, we're just going to multiply the numerator times the numerator and the denominator times the denominator. So 4 times 3 equals 12, and 5 times 8 equals 40. Now in this case, our greatest common factor is going to be 3. So we can divide, 4. So we can divide 12 by 4, and we get 3. And we divide 40 by 4, and we get 10. So our answer this time would be 3/10. Now another thing that we talked about in class was that we can actually do our simplifying before we multiply. So we'll go into this a little bit more in depth, but just to show you a way that we can simplify our fraction before actually multiplying. So let's take a look at this problem. So let's say we do 3/4 times 2/3. So we can go ahead and look and see if any single numerator has a common factor with any single denominator. And as I'm looking at this, I can see, okay, well, 3 and 3 obviously have the same factors, and I can divide those both by 3. So if I were to divide 3 by 3 and 3 by 3, well, I would get new numbers, right? So I can divide that. I can do 3 divided by 3, which is 1. And I can do 3 divided by 3, which is 1. Now, I'm also noticing that I can divide 4 and 2 both by 2. So I can do 4 divided by 2, and I can do 2 divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 equals 2, and 2 divided by 2 equals 1. So now, even though these are different numbers that I'm working with, if I were to multiply 1 times 1, I get 1. And I multiply 2 times 1, and I get 2. Now, just to show you that this is still actually correct, if I were to erase these added things that I did, and we were to multiply 3 times 2, and 4 times 3, 3 times 2 equals 6, 4 times 3 equals 12. And if I were to simplify this by dividing them both by 6, I would still get 1/2. So notice, by doing it this way, down here, I do all the simplifying beforehand, and sometimes it's a little bit easier than trying to simplify after you've done the multiplication.